just during the stream, if you try to phone me, I might hang up on this call because I am using my phone as my LTE because the Wi-Fi in the building is pretty slow tonight.
But it's slow, is it not?
Cool. 100%. Cool, man. Thank you.
Are we live?
Good evening, South Africans. My name is Kasi Tole, and welcome to the first segment of Monday Motivations with Standard Bank. So, what are we doing? Well, actually, it's an interesting story. Most of you would know that the CA profession is one of the most
Was expecting or asking of you. And then obviously transitioning from the Northern Cape into the cities, first time seeing lights and tarred roads and everything, you really start learning about choices, the choices that one has to make. That obviously gives you that bit of independence to say, I have choice in everything that I need to do. I learned about openness and transparency, how to be open and honest, having those hard conversations, making tough decisions. That obviously comes from an environment that you grew up with, where you're not really close to your family and that sort. You feel like you're the loner, you're standing out in terms of that. So you have to sort of do things on your own. So you build that within you.
Yeah.
And that's obviously at the age of 16, when I ventured out on my own, started crafting my own path. And all of those learnings is what made me make those decisions at that point in time.
You know, when you talk about choices, choices oftentimes come in consequences. And I would think that this is something that you probably would have learned a lot about from your grandfather, who was a pastor. And of course, that type of spiritual upbringing does tend to guide us as we grow up. And I think in an environment that you grew up in, the Northern Cape, probably not the busiest place in the world, very small communities, and of course, influences are very close. And when we talk about influences, we all know in society, it may just be a gamble in that you grow up in an environment where everything works well, you've got positive role models, and you've got those positive influences, and those filter into what you do. Alternatively, as we've seen in far too many instances, unfortunately, some of the negative influences tend to be the ones that are dominating that community, they're dominating that particular social setup. And this, of course, has got profound implications for the children that we're raising in those communities when they have to try and find their way and chart their way through that structure. You being raised in a family that was so grounded spiritually, did that at least assist with you cutting out the noise from negative social influences and then saying, actually, as a young man living in a country like this, living in a world like this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to do it?
Yes, I think it grounded one, definitely gave you a good foundation through the teaching and the learnings of my grandfather in terms of how you ground yourself. But it didn't really protect or shield you from what's happening in and around you. I mean, in the family itself also, alcohol abuse was there. So you obviously try and develop through that and stuff by that grounding that you had. So I think the first 10 years of my life with my grandparents back in the Northern Cape gave me that grounding to say whatever negative influences you find yourself in, poverty and all of those, not having food at night, those kind of things, you were able to develop and grow beyond that and find a positive mindset within it. I think the one thing they taught you is that happiness comes from within.
Yeah.
You drive that energy and stuff from internal. So you have to find that strength, everything from internal, obviously through that faith that you have in the higher power that will carry you through and deliver you from your current circumstances so that you thrive above it. And that obviously for me, the grounding was founded in those 10 years to say, when I came to the city and you start getting influence and seeing all these things that are happening in and around you, you could thrive above it and you could make that choice to say whether I want to experience this life or whether I want to experience this and make those choices in terms of what are the implications and consequences if I do make this decision right now, what will the outcome look like? And then you are able to move beyond that to say, no, this is not really the thing. Sometimes I tried some of the stuff, but then you realize this is not for me. This is also not where I was founded or grounded within. And that doesn't stand well with my principles and beliefs that I grew up with. Then you sort of transition into the next thing. And that's how I sort of try to find myself, to maneuver through what you get exposed through in the world.
Yeah, you know, when we talk about our family setup and our family structures, a lot of us actually, when we tell the story of how we were raised by grandparents far away from our parents, we tend to actually fail to follow up and mention that, by the way, the migrant labor system, for example, was a central influence into how a lot of us would then say we grew up in the rural areas, for example, and our parents were then living in the big cities, mainly because job opportunities were in the big cities, but the social ecosystem did not accommodate them living with their children, did not accommodate them raising them from childbirth. If your mother has to work from 8 to 5 and then the train takes 3 hours for her to get home, it is actually the practical thing for her to say, actually, I will go and let you live with my parents, being your grandparents, and then say until a point in time where perhaps my own immediate environment, my own immediate circumstances, or even economic circumstances improve to such an extent that I can then say you can come and live with me. Is that something that would resonate with your life story?
Yes, most definitely. I think obviously having a child at the age of 21 that my mother was, obviously now you have to try provide for this child. So to your point, I have to work low-end jobs, domestic work, working as a cashier. So I don't have the time because my hours are odd and stuff. Therefore, obviously, you do rely on that support system back at home in terms of grandparents. And that obviously also for us as children, that separation from your mother, that bond that you had to form, because I was sort of separated at 6 months. I started living with my grandparents. So you never get that time to form that bond with your mother. So you almost feel like a distant stranger at sometimes. So you do understand, obviously, why it was done, because she had to provide for you, send money back home so that you could go to school and get fed and be clothed. But then also you do feel that when you start growing up and you're like, I don't resonate and I don't feel that closeness, that somebody else that grew up with a mother or with their father as well. I mean, father has never been existent in my life, don't know who he is. So you sort of start to tend to lean to some of those things because your grandparents can only do so much for you in terms of discipline and some of the stuff that you learn as you grow to become sort of a teenager. At the age of 10, 11, you start moving and they can't keep up. Obviously, they're old and that pace of that you are now having to move at, they can't keep that up, and then now you don't have that bigger support system in your life. So it definitely affected my life as well in terms of that migrant work system and the social environment that you find yourselves in. And you sort of have to understand as a kid as well. But I do think it impacts us.
Yeah, you know, I sometimes refer to that as the social consequences of the labor fragility because, of course, in most instances, our parents cannot afford to be off for even one day at work because then they come back the day after they've been replaced by someone else. So I would say that that inability to say I've got security of employment then has this profound social consequences where, unfortunately, as it turned out, for most people, when they then have to transition into that world, then they're finding that, you know, that lack of an ongoing support system then becomes the reason they gravitate into adverse social behaviors. Alcohol abuse being perhaps the most common example, which is something you probably would have witnessed around the community of Vereeniging. And it's always a big challenge for a young man trying to find their place in a new environment, trying to bridge a relationship that essentially was broken at 6 months through, just distance alone, to then say, in spite of what I'm seeing around me, in spite of what other people are doing, which seems to be the easy things to do, I'm going to pursue something far more long-term, something far more ambitious, even though it may take forever. And this comes at some sacrifices.
Yeah.
Instead of you going to play with your friends and going partying, you have to be the one that studies at night, and then everybody's like, what are you studying for when you're all enjoying life? How do you then, at that young age, have the presence of mind to then say, I can see what's around me, I can hear the noise, but I'm destined for something much bigger than this. I'm destined for something much better than that. And more importantly, even coming to the age of 16 and saying, if I'm going to be what it is that I'm setting out to be, I may as well leave this environment altogether.
Yes, I definitely think it's different influences, different exposures. Reading a lot, obviously you start reading, you start watching movies, you start seeing there's a different life, there's a different way of being. You engage with others that are maybe from a more fortunate home than you become friends, you visit them, then you can see there's something better than what I currently have. So when you go back home, you have that uncomfortableness to say, but I'm seeing a different world. Coming from that small environment of a community of less than 5,000, you're in a farm, so your world context is shaped only to that environment. Then coming to Vereniging, your context shifted a little bit, because now you're in a broader environment, you're sort of in the suburbs, in the cities, you start seeing different things, that there is another way of being. And I think being captured in that negativity is something that I learned to drive myself internally, and taking back to my grandfather saying that you make yourself happy. You decide the direction of your path. And the one thing he always said is that one day I said, I want to be like you one day. I want to role model you. I want to become a pastor. And everybody thought that was my line of direction. One day I'm going to do this. The one thing he told me is that you must never follow anybody, because nobody knows where they're going. So it's ultimately, even him, he followed a path, and then his path led him to somewhere.
Yeah.
So he still didn't know where his path was taking him further. That's why it's like you have to craft. What you can do is learn from me. Learn from my mistakes, learn from my opportunities, what I did, so that you advance yourself and take a further leap than what I did. And then that's what I started doing, exposing myself, finding myself in different environments, walking the cities, walking the towns, making friends with different kind of races, people from different backgrounds, so that I bring all of that together, amalgamate it, and use that as my jumping frog to say, I can jump further. I want to leap further than where you are. I've now understood where you came from, how you got there, but how do I take that? And I jumped. And that for me was the biggest decision, to say, the negativity I grew up in, with to say, you're going to end up like this, you're not going to become nothing, you're going to be nobody, you're going to be like your uncles and stuff. Take that. How do I use that to motivate myself internally to say, I want to be better. I will show you that I can be better. And that's ultimately what I started doing, to take those diverse views that I've had, made it for me into one to say, this is the way to jump.
Yeah.
So make that hard decision. Yes, it will be tough, but you will only make it if you get out of the current situation.
Yeah.
To your point, sacrifices was made, but it was worthwhile sacrifices.
Yeah. You know, when you tell that, I remember that I usually tell people that I'm an accidental accountant. I always wanted to be a teacher, being raised by teachers, and at some point in time, like, this is what I want to pursue. And the one lesson that they all told me is like, hell no, you're not going to be a teacher. There's no money here. So eventually I was like, okay, let me look at alternatives, and being the accidental accountant is what I became. Now, if life had worked out differently, you'd be a Springbok right now, wouldn't you?
Yes, most definitely. The dream, obviously grow up in those environments. I found my escape through sports. So many people have different escapes. They use music, art, or something like that. Sports was for me the escape. It's where I found that community and family life again, because you have that closeness, that bond. Our coach always used to say, when you scrum as the 8, you must be as tight-knit as a family, because you mustn't be broken. And that obviously gave me that environment. So I always believed that and dreamt that I will be a Springbok or a Protea, or run athletics at national level. I believed I had the potential. I never wanted to limit myself. And obviously, you're at a disadvantage already if you compare yourself to your peers or somebody else. Just from a nutrition point of view, they eat well, they sleep well. You have all other kind of stress, work to do at home. You can't study before your chores and stuff are done. Those kind of things. So that obviously put them at an advantage. But if it wasn't for this, I would ideally have hopefully to run out in 2019
in
at
Japan.
Japan.
Yeah, things are happening there. I still want to figure out how a person who was supposed to be a Springbok ends up doing spreadsheets for a living. And this would be what, the University of Johannesburg at some point in time. You end up there and you're like, oh, well, it looks like I may just read about spreadsheets while playing rugby on the side. How did that materialize?
I had a cousin, he wanted to be an accountant, a CA, so he studied at school, he wanted to be that. He didn't make good marks, then he went into BCom education to do education of teaching accounting and economics. So he spent, after his first year at Wits, he came and he's like, he's applied for me at UJ and Wits. I got accepted, I had the marks, and then I need to go study. So in 2004, he came home in December, and there was like a little family meeting to try and get me to go and study because I still wanted to chase my dream of being a Springbok. That's all I wanted to do. So I told him, cool, I will go do it, because then I figured out that if I join one of the universities, it's a straight line for me. If I play rugby for them, I do well. It's a straight line in for me to the Lions. From the Lions, I can develop myself. So then I had a clear path or a goal in terms of how I'm going to make the rugby. So I said, cool, but if I fail, I quit and I continue with the rugby, because I know I'll definitely be good enough with the rugby to get into those teams and develop myself. So the minute I quit, I stopped the studies. So he applied for me for BCom Finance, and then, I started in 2005 at UJ. In the second year, I then swapped, obviously, to do the BCom route, because now you learned about CAs and stuff at one of the career fairs. So I then changed from BCom Finance to BCom Accounting.
Yeah, I mean, that profession, the CA profession, is one that obviously has very unique characteristics, and I think through the learning journey you get to encounter a lot of those issues around the importance of ethics and integrity. And I think obviously for anyone who wants to embark on the journey, these become the central guiding lights, in that there will come those moments when you're then suddenly confronted with a particular transaction or a particular situation. You're like, okay, what do I do? And it's not the type of thing that you can teach a person to say, this will happen in your workplace and this is what you must do. It really now becomes a very instinctive reaction of saying, as a person who's been trained and groomed in this particular way, as a person who believes in what that profession is about, this is my instinctive reaction. And of course, we hope that in most cases, it'll be the right reaction.
Yeah. So definitely, like I said, at an early age, you learn about open and honesty, doing things. You learn the hard way. You go to hiding if you did lie and get caught out. So doing the wrong things always leads to consequences. And that obviously says that these are values and principles that you should be grounded with, that you should be taught at home. And that obviously makes you the kind of right fit for that kind of CA role or that kind of audit job that you will do. Because there it's really about doing things when somebody's not seeing you. That small little audit paper, not to phantom thick, not to say you have done something but you didn't do it, because the consequences of that it's obviously severe. And that sort of is something that you start with as an own value system and principle as an individual, to say, who am I? Who do I stand for? What do I believe in? And does this thing suit what I stand for and believe in? Does my values align with where I want to go to? Because ultimately, if you just do it for the job and stuff and for the money, you're not going to be able to be successful at the end of the day. And that's where people start doing the wrong things, overlooking things, not watching the right things. And that's where the ethics then start getting questioned at the end of the day.
You know, sometimes people refer to the CA profession as a profession of national value, and it is. And some cases I always look back and say, if it's a profession of national value, do we then ensure that everyone who wants to can access it? And of course, in the South African context, the question of access to higher education remains an ongoing talking point. It's not easy for everyone to do it. But once individuals have been given the opportunity to then enter the profession, then it's something that they need to capitalize on. And of course, you then working in an environment where there's so many young people that enter the Standard Bank doors and say, actually, this is what I want to do, this is how I want to succeed. You then have this unique responsibility of assisting that one additional person get that leg across in order for them to meet what their ultimate objectives are. And I think that's probably linked to the question of, you know, sometimes we may have the best intentions of achieving something, but resources are just a limitation. And the things that we want to do, we cannot afford to do them. And it always takes that one person or those two individuals who then show up at that critical moment and then say, here's a hand that's going to get you to move just 1 inch further. And that becomes the breaking point that ensures that you do succeed. Did you ever have a teacher who did that for you?
Yes, most definitely. I think in all of my life, throughout my life, high school, there was always a friend, even primary school, there was always a friend and their family that somewhat adopted me, gave me some of the stuff that I didn't have, even if it was sort of second-hand and stuff. But then in terms of my varsity and stuff, I think it was obviously hard getting through varsity, funding yourself, you don't really have the money and stuff. And then, yeah, one of my high school teachers, Mrs. Okamp, came along, gave me that call to say, how are you doing? Here you are studying now. I always thought you had potential. Well done to you. Is there anything we can help with? And at first you're like, no, I'm fine. I'll get through it. But eventually you reach a point that life is not treating you so well. You're not making it and you need that help. So obviously phoning her back that day was probably the best decision I've made in my life, to swallow that pride and say, I need help. And she and her husband really came along with the entire family to really support me, pay for some of my studies, accommodations, food, supplies. And that really obviously helped me to transition into where I am today. So I definitely had lots of people in numerous points in my life. Just at that very moment where I feel I was going to go or give up, somebody would come into my life, sometimes a brief moment, some of them for a lifetime. They are still there, some of them. And she's really stuck with me throughout that stages to see it through all the way until where I am today. They've played a critical role in my life and my career. And similarly, that's what I strive to do, because I got here through help. And that's what I try and do every day. And I've made it my life purpose to say my purpose in life is to grow myself in order to help others.
Yeah.
Because I got here through help, therefore I must lend that helping hand to your point.
Yeah, you know, I usually just refer to it as the gift of opportunity, because at the end of the day, somebody took a gamble and said, I'm going to give this young man an opportunity to be able to have a meal tomorrow morning so he can go and write that exam. And that is a small gesture, but it has profound consequences, it has profound benefits, not just for the individual, but for society at large. I mean, here we are talking to an employee and a taxpayer, and I think society likes taxpayers, for example. So yes, there's been that social benefit. You then obviously went off and did articles. I think you went to Mazars after UJ.
Yes.
And one of the questions that we've got from our Facebook feed is someone wants to know, what was the most challenging thing that you actually experienced during articles themselves?
Sure, there was a lot. I think obviously learning and understanding, for me, it was about value creation. How do I create value to what I do every day? And that was what I found a lot of challenge, because you don't want to do what the same person did the prior year. Here's a working paper, look at that, do that. I really wanted to come and make a change, and every day come and make that difference in that audit or in that company. And so I tried to be very nosy and get involved into things I shouldn't have, but it allowed me to grow at the end of the day, but it also allowed me to change the way things are getting done. And I can only be grateful for Mazars giving me that opportunity to say, here really is the opportunity, take the platform, use it, and make that change that you want to do. And they've really allowed me to be that difference in terms of how we do audits, the way we do things, challenging the other team members to say, that obviously is the hardest thing. Talking to your peers and challenging them to say, don't just copy an audit paper, you can do better. We are here to add that value. And that probably was some of the biggest challenges I had to face in terms of staying the course, doing what's right for the client, adding that different value, because clients at the end of the day are paying you a fee, and you have to show why you are here and the worth that you are to them. Instead of just every time ticking the box and saying, what you said, it's 10, it's 10. Well done, 10, we agree.
And I think, obviously, you know, as the world moved towards automation and a lot of the skills that we thought we were being trained to do now become something that a computer can do, I still think there remains a critical role to be played by people who've been trained in a specialized manner, in that there are things that a computer cannot decipher. There are things that require the human instinct, the human judgment call to be made in order for us to achieve the ideal outcome. The example I always use, I was actually speaking to students from Nelson Mandela University last week Friday about just the value of critical judgment and professional skepticism being some of the issues that we talk about, in that at the end of the day, if you're going to be part of this, there is a lot of reliance that society places on your ability to apply your mind, to apply your academic wisdom and say, by the way, these are the variables and these are the best outcomes, not just for me, not just for the client, but for society at large. And that for me becomes the one part that amplifies the value of the profession to society at large. Now, of course, like all professions, it does go through its turbulences, and I think probably the past 2 or 3 years have been the most turbulent that we've seen. There's a lot of people then sitting and say, yeah, but this thing used to be great when you started 10 or 9 years ago, but right now, surely there must be something that isn't subject to as much hysteria and drama as we've seen before. How do you then re-centralize this profession as the one that individuals who believe in the public interest, individuals who want to offer something of value to society should pursue more than any other?
I think for me, definitely, you can create all the fancy AIs, the data, all of that. But one thing that can't be changed is that ethical component, to add that ethics, the governance around it. So yes, the systems will allow you to have better processes and stuff, but there's still that human element to say, what is the ethics around this thing? Are we being ethical with the system and software and stuff that we've developed? And then to your point around the critical thinking is to say, how do I take and apply my skill set now or my learnings that I've got from my education to look at problems, solve problems by interpreting data, analyzing that data. Because yes, we're saying there's big data and all of this data are running and the AI giving you some outputs and all of that. But our role is really now to say, critically analyze that information, take the data, problem solve for what the outcomes or the insights are from that data extracted. And that's how we then help our clients or the society at large to transform and diversify what we are doing at the moment. And that is the skill that is still required, and that is the skill I believe our sector as the CAs can still bring to society, to corporates, to anybody, is that ability to help solve problems and that ability for us to take that, what we've learned, and transition it to transform businesses and let them ultimately diversify their operations and stuff.
And I think, I mean, we're living in very turbulent times economically where a lot of businesses just need someone to give them some insights into how do you manage their current crisis, how do you plan ahead going forward, and these are going to become the points in time where we then have a much higher reliance on people like chartered accountants to actually stand up and be counted and say, this is the assistance we're offering to society, this is the guidance that we're putting out there. And I think obviously given the fact that so much of what we're trying to deal with is really prospective in nature, where we can't predict the future, then the question of judgment and, you know, just that professionalism is really quite important at this stage. But people on Twitter have got questions for you. They want to know, how do you actually manage to balance your work versus your life? You're a family man, and at this stage, we know that being a CA, they are the long hours that go into the dead of the next morning. How do you manage that balance?
I think work-life balance is one thing. For me, it's really the commitment that changes. So the level of commitment that I have. So when I'm at work, majority of the time, 90% to 100% of the time, I'm committed to work, and that's what I do. But when I go and engage in my social life, then I'm committed there. I think when you start mixing the two, when I'm with friends, you're also on your phone looking at work and stuff, then that's where the balance is not there. So for me, it's really about being committed into the various roles that I play, husband, father. So when I'm a father, I'm committed there. There mustn't be other engagements and stuff. Maybe here or there, less 10%, maybe or so. Sometimes you go on a holiday, the phone buzz and stuff, but it mustn't be the majority of the time. That is really, for me, how I balance my work and life. It's really my commitment levels to each of those functional areas of my life. To say, when I'm at work, I'm committed there, and then I know I get the right outcomes and focus. And when I'm at home, I get the right outcome and focus there because I'm committed my time there. Similar to social or friends, or still play a bit of sports and stuff. So I make sure I commit myself there all the time. And that's, for me, is the balance.
So I'm very disappointed because you've just told me that the next time I go clubbing, I can't ask people about depreciation.
No, definitely not.
But it's important. People need to understand these things. But, you know, I'm just talking about that work-life balance has taken a new dimension in the world that we're living in now, in the times that we're living in that a lot of us are now having to work from home. And of course, trying to then distinguish between the work time versus the home time has become even more complicated now. In fact, one of my friends said, well, actually, we are no longer living in our houses. In fact, we are actually living at work. As well. Instead of people saying, yeah, this is the work time, this is this. And the worst thing about it is that everybody knows you're at home. So it's difficult for you to say, no, I can't make it there because I'm somewhere else. They're like, well, aren't you sitting at home? How has that manifested for you during this time when you actually now are stuck at home, when you're forced to sit at home, when you cannot go and interact with clients who make up the core of your portfolio? How do you then manage to then say, I'm still delivering value, not just to my clients, but also being visible and present for my family? Because if you have a study that's locked for 24 hours, you may as well move out of home because you're no longer the family man.
Yeah. Now, I think, and that's where the sort of rules comes in, having a clear profile of what your day looks like, setting those boundaries is critical. For me, the biggest thing has really been virtual collaboration. You're starting to collaborate more virtually, and you start becoming comfortable with that. So how you engage clients, how you engage friends, even family. We had to phone family via video calls and stuff. So that whole engagement model has sort of changed. But then also for me is having those clear lockouts to say, I start my day at 7 to 6. Come 6 o'clock, I lock that door, and that's the hour or so that I have for family time. And yes, the kids doesn't understand. They were saying, but now you're at home, but we're seeing you even less, to your point. So I really started putting in those breaks and stuff, having clear end of day, so that you know your day ends at this time, you know your day starts at that time. So I switch off between 7 to 6 o'clock. Look, there's still sometimes, obviously, where it's required, then you'll sort of work a little bit late, but I make sure I go spend my 2 hours with the family. And during the day, I have like a 10 to 15 minute break time that I go and play with my daughter a bit, and we have a snack. That's my snack time out in the garden. You have some fresh time. And that's how you keep sort of the wheel turning over, to have that sort of balance. I was actually laughing this morning. I was checking in with the team to say, how was your weekend? And I was saying, for me, it felt like for the first time I was away from work, because we left the house for the weekend. So it was our first time away from work.
Yeah, finally, really away from work.
Yeah, because that whole integration now, you actually don't know what is happening on the separation anymore, because it's all in one. So I really think it's having a clear plan, communicate it as well to your colleagues or to your clients and stuff. And then everybody knows that during this time, it's your lunchtime, you have that break between 12 to 2.
Yeah.
And then that's something I try to set up and structure with the teams as well, to say, you must have that. Nobody's going to work 18 hours flat a day. You actually become more unproductive that way. So
It's our new reality. You're the head of personal and business banking for the City of Johannesburg. It's obviously a very exciting job you've been doing for a while.
Yep.
And I'm always curious when people do a particular job and when people sign up for a particular job about how they analyze it from the prism of 3 dimensions. And when I talk about the 3 dimensions, I want to know, what does it mean for you as the individual? What does it mean for Standard Bank as the institution? And what does it mean for South Africa as a nation and society at large? Because I'm always of the view that if you can't articulate how what you do adds value around those 3 dimensions, you're probably not going to be in that job for very long. And if you are, it's simply because no one else thinks that job is worth doing, so therefore nobody signs up for it. Talk us through what it means to do what you do for the individual, for the institution, and for society.
For me, and I think obviously the reason why I chose Standard Bank and I came with a plan for 7 years was really because of their purpose, growing Africa, and that for me was really, obviously, like I said, my purpose is to grow people, and I want to help and support people. So every day I come to work, and what I do is worthwhile, because you can see the transformation, you can see the transition of clients and the growth of clients. So if every day, if I don't come and add value and adhere or build somebody's aspiration or fulfill somebody's dream, that for me is obviously not a good day, because my 3 objectives that I come to work for is either it must have an impact on customers, people, and obviously ultimately society at large. So whatever I come to and whatever I do, I ask myself, is this meeting worth it? What is the outcome or the impact on these 3 things? So for me, it's really that value, being able to be that change that you want to be, to aspire and fulfill clients' lives, and ultimately fulfill my life as well. I'm learning, I'm growing myself and developing myself as well. And every day I come to work, it's a challenge. You don't know how your day is going to go. There might be some issues that pops up, but you're always ready for it. And through that, you learn and develop yourself as well. Plus, you have solved a matter or an issue for the client as well. So for me as the individual, it's really about aligning to that purpose.
Yeah.
Their value system is aligned to mine. Therefore, I could find myself grounded and rooted in this environment, because it gives me that opportunity to live out who I am, my authentic self, not to come and be something that I'm not. And I think for the company itself is really obviously to really strive and live up to that purpose of growing Africa and fulfilling people's lives and radically redefining the way we do that as well. So that obviously gives me that comfort that as long as the company strives to do that, that therefore I can still be aligned and always fulfill that as well. And obviously the impact to society is really, for us, keeping companies' doors and businesses open, so that obviously we keep people employed and we keep those taxpayers going and striving for that. And that's really how you build and develop society as well. And obviously in the communities that we are in, to really be relevant and present there, instead of just having a branch or a point of representation there, but we also want to make an impact in those communities and make the changes there. And that's where you really want to see it. And that's what we're striving to do, to say, in each of our representations, how relevant are we in that community?
Yeah.
What's our involvement and contribution to that community?
And particularly because individuals and communities have got a unique relationship with the bank, in that it's a relationship built on trust, in that instead of putting keeping my money under my mattress, I'm going to come and hand it over to you and hope that you keep it for me when I ask for it the next day. You can make it available to me. So it's a very unique relationship in our social architecture, and I don't think that people will forget easily just how important the relationship is. So having people like you being part of it give me the sense of comfort that actually it's still the type of place where I want to be keeping my money. I do have space under my mattress, so if anything goes wrong, I will definitely be using that as an option. Just, I mean, towards the end, you know, there will be probably a lot of people, not only just within Standard Bank, but across different institutions, who are then saying, well, I'm going to finish my articles, and then thereafter, I need to find my place in society. And sometimes it's a matter of, I need someone to talk to guide me through the process, because career selection is an ongoing process, and career choices are something that needs to be very well informed. And sometimes people become so frustrated by the bureaucracy of the institutions, they don't see where they fit in, and then you see people exiting the system, not because opportunities are better elsewhere, but because of the frustrations with the internal dynamics where they just don't see the big picture. How do you then assist trainees within Standard Bank in particular to understand that, yes, this is the journey for now, these are the 3 years of articles, but should you be interested in this part, should your passions lie this way, hey, that's the person to talk to. Go and find out how they did it, because we want to actually keep more people engaged in the process and retain people within the system rather than just being a conveyor belt.
Yeah. So for me, the first point of help or reference I give them is to say, please come and apply what you have learned. I think many times we go and study stuff, and then we just come and fall into the run of the mill. People will tell you, but this is how we've always done it. You have to apply what you have learned. You have studied for 4 years. You've learned all this knowledge, how to do stuff, how to think about things differently, how to problem solve differently. Firstly, come and apply yourself. Once you apply yourself, you must have a clear goal and vision for where you want to go to. Yeah. What is the dream? Why did you choose this route between inside and outside public practice? You have chosen this route to come to this bank. What is it where you want to end up? Then you obviously start structuring your career cycle to say, cool, I have the next 3 years of articles. I will be going through a rotational plan. But how do I, during this phase of this 3 years, start learning some of the stuff that I want to go and do at the end of it as well? So start the development now, instead of waiting for that 3 years to end. Yeah. And then you want to figure out, oh, no, I need to develop myself, because that next role I was envisioning after the 3 years actually requires me to have a bit more or to know a bit more. So start learning some of that now in that 3 years, so that when you get there, you're almost 80% ready for that role, and you make yourself an obvious choice. And to really, like, you have many graduates here, a very big place, but what is the 3 characteristics that will make you stand out amongst the rest? Because if I have to go out here and say, there's 50 of you, why must I choose you? And that is really the 3 things that you have to know about yourself, that you will drive and make yourself stand out. And that's really sort of the guidance to say, this is how you develop and get to the next role. Yeah. But that goal, it must be clear. You can't be after 2 years saying, no, I want to go do this now. You can't be able to help.
Clarity of purpose is important.
Because nobody's going to be able to help you if you can't have that clarity. Because otherwise I'll guide you wrong, because based on what you're saying now, I'll give you that guidance. Yeah. And then tomorrow you come back and you say, no, then I'll have to guide you again. And then we end up frustrated in that cycle. And then that's where the revolving door starts, because you're saying there's no. If we're clear in our purpose, the right individuals are there to help you develop. And it's my role, obviously, as aligned to help you find the right people to mentor you. And that's what we do. So say, if you want to go into that space, I might not have the knowledge, but I'll go find you somebody in that space that will then help you transition into it. But the development starts from day one.
Yeah. No, that's a very key thing. Lee-John, we could go on about these things for a very long time, but the world being what it is, we have to limit these things to particular attention spans, to particular time frames, because you have to get home. It would be very ironic of us to have to speak about the work-life balance only for you to get home close to 9 p.m. instead of close to 7 p.m. So unfortunately, we have to end our conversation here, but thank you very much for agreeing to be the very first guest on the Standard Bank Monday Motivation Sessions. Guys, next week, we'll actually be carrying on. Next week, we're speaking to Tembelihle Ngema, who's the head of finance for personal and business banking. So if you want to hear her story, please tune in 5:30 on the Facebook page. As you've seen today, that's where we're going to be. But more importantly, remember what happens on Friday. On Friday, we have to talk about the technical stuff that's going to get you over the line to becoming a chartered accountant. And this Friday in particular, we'll be talking about the ITC 2020 paper. So if you wrote it or if you're going to be writing, tune in so we can see how we can help you. Standard Bank Motivation Mondays. My name is Kasi Tole. Thank you. Good evening.